Why this 108-year-old is still healthy. The secret is these 7 foods. Welcome to the debate. Usually, we spend our time here parsing peer-reviewed studies, looking at meta-analyses, and really just trying to find the signal in the noise of modern science. But today, we are throwing the papers out the window.
We are looking at a singular, undeniable, and frankly baffling data point. Hattie May. She is 108 years old. She was born before television, before antibiotics, and way before the food pyramid. And if you look at her daily routine, she breaks almost every rule modern medicine has created in the last 50 years.
She doesn't just break the rules, she practically mocks them. I mean, if a cardiologist looked at her grocery list without knowing her age, they'd likely prescribe a statin and a prayer. We are talking about a centenarian who claims the secret to longevity involves frying eggs in bacon grease every single morning and drinking coffee black since she was 16.
Right? And yet she is still here, not in a nursing home, not bedridden, but sitting on her porch, lucid, articulate, and strong. So the question we have to wrestle with today is simple but profound. Why did this happen to her? I will be taking the position that her longevity might be entirely in spite of certain habits, not because of them. We have to be very careful not to confuse correlation with causation here.
Fair enough. Let's get right into it. From my perspective, the strongest piece of evidence we have is survival. I mean, Hattie explicitly points out that every doctor who ever told her to watch her cholesterol is dead and gone. That is a powerful data point in itself. She operates on a philosophy she calls truth, passed down from your great-grandmama, not from a commercial. She argues that modern science oscillates. Eggs are bad, then they're good. Butter is poison, then it's fine. But her approach, focusing on food God gave us, avoids processed nonsense and prioritizes functional utility for the brain and muscles. It has remained constant, and it has clearly worked.
Extreme caution. We are walking right into the n=1 logical fallacy. Yes, she lived to 108, but for every Hattie May who ate bacon grease and lived this long, there are thousands who did the exact same thing and died of a heart attack at 65. We just don't hear their stories because they aren't around to tell them. Survivorship bias is a real phenomenon. When you look closely at her list, it is a mix of scientifically sound advice, like berries and fish, and potentially dangerous advice for the general population, like heavy red meat consumption and that daily bacon grease. I think if we want to know why this happened to her specifically, we need to look at the biological mechanisms she describes versus her likely genetic realities. And frankly, her lifestyle might be the actual variable here, not the grease.
Well, let's parse exactly what she's doing biologically then, because she isn't just eating randomly. She doesn't eat for calories, she eats for function. Let's tackle the most controversial part of her diet first, the proteins. Hattie is completely unapologetic about red meat and eggs. She eats 2 whole eggs every morning and insists on red meat for dinner.
And she specifically laughs at the modern tendency to eat chicken breast and tofu. She calls it weak food.
Exactly. She views the animal differently than we do. She calls a cow a machine for turning grass and sunshine into strength. Think about that image. She isn't seeing a burger, she's seeing a nutrient transfer vehicle. She argues that as you age, the body gets frail because people stop eating the very things that build muscle: iron, B12, carnitine. We know sarcopenia, muscle wasting, is a primary driver of death in the elderly. If you fall and break a hip because you're weak, that's often the end. Hattie isn't weak. She argues she's strong because she eats the building blocks of strength.
I'm actually with you on the sarcopenia issue. We absolutely underprescribe protein to the elderly. But we have to talk about the delivery mechanism here. It's not the protein I take issue with, it's the package. She is frying those eggs in bacon grease. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that as health advice. From a lipidology standpoint, that is a massive daily dose of saturated fat, and more concerningly, oxidized cholesterol.
But when you heat animal fat to high temperatures, you risk creating oxysterols, which are potent drivers of atherosclerosis. But are they? Or is that exactly the fluctuating science she warns against? Because she says her heart is ticking just fine. I think the nuance here, and maybe the reason why this works for her, is in the quality of the food. She specifies grass-fed beef and eggs from chickens that run in the yard.
Okay, that is a crucial distinction. A cow eating grass in the sun has a completely different fatty acid profile than a cow eating corn in a feedlot. Grass-fed beef is higher in omega-3s and CLA, which are anti-inflammatory. Grain-fed beef is essentially a bomb of pro-inflammatory omega-6s. So, sure, if Hattie is eating high-quality pasture-raised animals, she is mitigating some of the risk. But I still can't sign off on the bacon grease. That is pure saturated fat.
Consider what she isn't eating, though. She isn't eating seed oils. She isn't eating processed vegetable shortening or margarine. She's eating a stable, natural fat. Is it possible that the danger of saturated fat is only present when you combine it with the inflammation of a modern lifestyle? Her arteries aren't inflamed, so the cholesterol creates no plaque. That's the lipid energy model argument. The idea that in the absence of metabolic syndrome, high cholesterol isn't necessarily a killer.
It's possible. It's also highly probable that Hattie has a genetic variant, maybe on the PCSK9 gene, or her APOE status, that allows her to clear that fat rapidly. If I ate bacon grease every day, my LDL would skyrocket. Hattie might just be genetically Teflon.
Or maybe she's just right about the yolk. She defends the yolk passionately. She says it has choline for the brain and lutein for the eyes. For decades, the medical community told people to throw the yolk away. We threw away the most nutrient-dense part of the egg because we were scared of cholesterol. Now the guidelines have quietly walked that back. Hattie didn't need a guideline revision. She just listened to her grandmother.
Yeah, I will concede on the eggs. The yolk is nature's multivitamin. Choline is absolutely critical for the synthesis of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter involved in memory and muscle control. By eating yolks her whole life, she essentially fortified her nervous system. But again, it's a game of Russian roulette. She survived the bacon grease to benefit from the choline. Not everyone would be so lucky.
Well, let's look at where that choline is going, because her mind is what really fascinates me. Usually at 108, if you're alive, you're often in a state of cognitive decline. Hattie is sharp. She remembers dates, names, details, and she credits this to a specific brain fuel protocol involving coffee, raw cacao, and fatty fish.
This section of her testimony was where I really started to lean forward, because she uses language that sounds like folklore, but she is actually describing very complex biochemistry.
Right? She drinks coffee black. She calls it a message to the body to get to work. But then she talks about raw cacao, not a Hershey's bar, but the bitter powder. She says it has the spark. And then she mentions PQQ.
Which is wild. PQQ, pyrroloquinoline quinone, is a compound found in soil and certain foods like cacao and kiwi. It is one of the only substances known to stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis.
Help us out with the translation there.
It helps your cells grow new power plants. As we age, our mitochondria die off or become dysfunctional. That's why older people get tired. Hattie is consuming a compound that literally regrows the energy centers of her cells. She calls them spark plugs, which is scientifically highly accurate.
And she pairs that with fatty fish, salmon, sardines. She calls the oil the lubricant that keeps the engine from rusting.
Rusting is the perfect layman's term for oxidative stress. The brain is about 60% fat. If you don't provide it with high-quality building blocks, specifically DHA and EPA from fish, the structural integrity of the brain degrades. Hattie fears a brain that can't remember your own children's names more than she fears mercury or anything else.
Exactly. And she specifically mentions keeping the sadness from creeping in. I found that profound. She isn't just talking about being sad, she's connecting diet to mood.
That is the neuroinflammation hypothesis of depression. When the brain is inflamed, often due to a lack of omega-3s and an excess of processed foods, it manifests as depression, brain fog, and lethargy. Hattie seems to understand that mental health is physical health. You can't have a happy spirit with an inflamed brain. That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the role of her lifestyle? How do you mean? Well, I agree on the biochemistry of the omega-3s, but I question the magic of the cacao and coffee alone. You can eat all the cacao and salmon you want, but if you don't use the hardware, it rots. Hattie talks about getting to work. She picks berries. She cooks. She argues with her neighbors. She is cognitively engaged. There is a concept called cognitive reserve. It's like a bank account of neural connections. Hattie has been making deposits every day for 108 years. The coffee and the PQQ provide the fuel, but her activity provides the structure. I suspect if she sat in a room and just ate salmon, she wouldn't be this sharp.
I think you're underselling the fuel, though. You can't drive a Ferrari on empty, no matter how good of a driver you are. Hattie has provided her brain with the exact substrates it needs to repair itself. If she had followed the low-fat craze of the 90s, if she had swapped her eggs for bagels and her fish for pasta, I truly believe she would have succumbed to dementia years ago. She built a fortress for her mind out of cholesterol and omega-3s.
A fortress implies defense. And that brings us to the one part of her diet where I have absolutely zero pushback. This is where Hattie May stops being a controversial outlier and starts sounding like a cutting-edge microbiome researcher. The living diet, or the garden, as she calls it. She talks about berries and fermented foods.
Yes, this is the safety net. This is likely why she survived the bacon grease. She says, medicine is in the color. She eats blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and she explicitly avoids what she calls fast nervous sugar.
Fast nervous sugar. I love that phrase. She is describing high glycemic processed carbohydrates, the kind that spike your blood glucose, spike your insulin, and lead to glycation. Glycation is basically when sugar molecules bond to proteins and gum up the works. It's what causes wrinkles, stiff arteries, and cellular aging. Hattie avoids that entirely.
And she replaces it with fermented foods, sauerkraut, buttermilk. She says the gut is a garden and you have to tend the soil. This proves her great-grandma's truth was actually advanced biology expressed in simple terms.
I concede this is the strongest part of her argument. We are only just now, in the last 15 years, fully appreciating the gut microbiome. We know that a diverse microbiome regulates the immune system, lowers inflammation, and even produces neurotransmitters like serotonin. Unlike the bacon grease, this advice is universally applicable. Hattie has been curating her microbiome for a century.
This is what I mean by ancestral wisdom. She didn't need a stool sample analysis to know this. She just knew that a happy gut is a happy life.
Here is my theory on why this happened to her. The berries and the fermented foods acted as the cleaning crew. The berries are loaded with polyphenols, compounds that scrub up free radicals. So, every morning, she creates some oxidative stress with the bacon grease, but then she neutralizes it with the coffee and the berries. It's a push-pull system. She puts in the dirty fuel for power, but she has an aggressive maintenance schedule to clean it up.
I think that's a fair assessment, but I'd frame it slightly differently. I don't think she views the fat as dirty. I think she views the fat as structural and the berries as protective. It's a complete ecosystem. But we can't stop at the food, because Hattie herself says that if you stop at the food, you miss the point. The food is the fuel, but it ain't the engine.
Exactly. This is the root cause. This is the fourth dimension of her longevity, the spirit. And she isn't talking about ghosts. She's talking about stress, bitterness, and purpose.
This is where we leave biochemistry and enter psychoneuroimmunology. She says, you can eat all the red meat in the world, but if your heart is full of bitterness, you're going to get sick. She prescribes forgiveness not as a moral virtue, but as a survival mechanism. She says to laugh even when it hurts and sit on the porch and watch the sun go down.
I used to roll my eyes at this kind of advice. You know, just be happy and you'll live longer. It sounds trite, but the data is actually overwhelming. Bitterness, anger, holding grudges, these are physiological states. When you are bitter, you are in a state of chronic sympathetic nervous system arousal. You are in fight or flight. Your body is pumping cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine.
And what does chronic cortisol do?
It destroys you. It suppresses your immune system. It raises your blood pressure. It breaks down muscle tissue, and it shrinks the hippocampus in the brain. Hattie says, worrying gives you a heart attack. She is literally correct. Stress inflames the endothelial lining of the blood vessels. You can eat the perfect diet, but if you are marinating in cortisol because you hate your neighbor, you will die young.
Hattie has a ritual. She ends every day watching the sun go down, thanking the good Lord for another day. That isn't just prayer. That is a nervous system reset.
Exactly. She is actively engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. This is the only state in which the body can repair itself. If you are always stressed, you are never repairing. Hattie's engine is her ability to regulate her own nervous system. She refuses to let the sadness creep in. She refuses to hold on to anger. The low stress from this mindset actually mitigated the physical damage potentially caused by the high-fat diet. It's the will to live made tangible. She talks about having people to love. We know loneliness is as dangerous as smoking. Hattie makes sure she isn't lonely. She makes sure she isn't bitter. And that might be the real answer to our central question. Why did this happen to her? It's not just the bacon grease, and it's not just the berries. It's that she built a lifestyle that minimized the wear and tear of existence. She fueled the tank with high-density nutrition. She maintained the machinery with the berries and fish. And most importantly, she didn't overheat the engine with stress.
That's a beautiful synthesis. As we wrap up, I think Hattie represents a triumph of naturalism over interventionism. Her longevity happened because she trusted food that comes from the earth and maintained a happy gut and a forgiving heart. She shows us it's the whole picture. It's the interplay between the food God gave us and the way we treat the people around us.
I still wouldn't recommend the bacon grease to my patients. I have to stand by that. I think Hattie is a fascinating case study of resilience, but her longevity is likely a complex interaction of genetics, specific health choices, and a powerful psychological outlook, rather than proof that bacon grease is medicine. But I will recommend her berries, her fish, and absolutely her attitude. The idea that forgiveness is medicine is something modern science needs to quantify better.
Regardless of the dietary debate, the connection between spirit and survival really is the most intriguing takeaway. Real truth gets passed down from your great-grandma. There is clearly so much more to explore in this material, and maybe we should all make a phone call to our elders today. Hattie May is still teaching us, and I have a feeling she's going to be sitting on that porch for a few more years yet.
I wouldn't bet against her. Thank you for joining us for this edition of The Debate. We'll see you next time.